In today's video, we're going to be talking about some different types of angle pairs. So the first thing that we're going to be doing is working on this foldable. You should have a handout that looks similar to this. The first thing I did was I just cut around those dotted lines. I will say though, on the right hand side over here, you notice I left a little bit of an edge there because for some reason when this copied, it didn't copy quite center, so I didn't want to cut off any of my writing. So you might want to make special care that you're not cutting off anything on the other side when you trim that up. So this is the foldable we're going to use, so I am going to fold on this solid line here. So I have already cut mine up, and I'm just going to go ahead and fold on that dotted line. I'm going to leave the top one open because that's where we're going to start. So the first one we're working on is adjacent angles. So the first one we're going to work on here is at the top. That's adjacent angles. So I'll go ahead and zoom in a little bit for you so you can see what we have with adjacent angles. So for adjacent angles here, adjacent angles are two angles that share a common vertex. A common vertex. And they have a common side. A common side. So another way to say that is that they're right next to each other. So adjacent, the person who lives right next to you, they would be adjacent to you. So maybe you share a common property line, or if you're in an apartment, the apartment right next to you, you share a common wall. If you go to a hotel, the room right next to you, right next door, you're going to have a common wall there. Or the one right underneath, if you're on a two-story apartment complex, somebody who would be below you or above you, you share a common wall there, either the floor or the ceiling. So those are all adjacent. They have a common vertex and a common side, so we can also say they're next to each other. So we're going to look over here at this picture, and we're going to list 3 pairs of adjacent angles. Okay? So just 3 pairs. There's lots of them, but we're just going to pick out 3 of them. So I'm going to start here with angle 1. Remember our angle symbol from the other day? And what one would go with angle 1? Which ones are right next to? So they share a common side and a common vertex. So they all have the same vertex. So we want one that shares a common side. So I could either say this right side of angle 1 would be a common side with angle 2. So I could say angle 2. Or I could say the left side of angle 1 shares a side with angle 6. So I could even say angle 1 and angle 6 would be adjacent. Because if you notice, they're right next to each other. They don't overlap, they just share a common vertex and a common side. So let's look for one more. I'm going to come down here to angle 4. Angle 4 would be adjacent to, so its side here, we could say angle 3, or this side over here, it's in common with angle 5. So I'm just going to put angle 3 there. So as I said, there's lots of different ones. These are just 3 examples of some adjacent angles. Okay? So that's our adjacent angles piece. So then we're going to come down here to complementary angles. Complementary angles are 2 angles that add up to 90 degrees. 90 degrees, exactly 90 degrees. So when we talked about our angle basics, we had a right angle. So we have 2 angles that when we put them together, make a right angle. They do have to be adjacent to each other. So any 2 angles, when you add those up, as long as you get a total of 90, those would be considered to be complementary to one another. So let's come over here and look at a couple examples. So a couple examples first. We're going to find the value of x. Now you see this symbol here, that's our right angle symbol. Anytime you see that little box, that means it makes a right angle, or 90 degrees. So if we look at this one on the left, we have 58 degrees for this top piece. This bottom one is x, so 58 plus x equals 90 degrees. So 58 plus what? Well, I'm going to subtract 58 from both sides. And so then I get x equals 32. So x is 32 degrees. 58 plus my 32 gives me 90 degrees that I need there. Okay, so I'm going to come over to this one. I'm going to do the same thing. So I have 29 degrees plus my x equals 90, because if these two added together, I should get 90 degrees because I have that little box again. So I'm going to subtract my 29 from both sides, and I get x equals 61 degrees. So that's 61 degrees there. So remember, when we're talking about complementary angles, they're going to add up to 90 degrees. Add up to 90 degrees. The next one we're going to do is supplementary angles. So supplementary angles are two angles that add up to 180 degrees. So if you remember the other day from our foldable, 180 degrees is a straight angle. So we want it to be a straight angle. And again, they do not have to be adjacent to each other. They can be, but they don't have to be. So we have two different examples over here. Let's take a look at those. So for this first one, they tell us we have 122 degrees. This side, the right-hand side, is x. And together, they make a straight line or a straight angle. So if I add together 122 plus my x, I'm going to get 180 degrees. So in order to find x, I'm going to subtract 122 from both sides, and I end up getting 58. So x equals 58 degrees. Okay? So those two happen to be adjacent to each other because they're sharing a common vertex and a common side. However, these two aren't adjacent to each other. Remember, we said they don't have to be adjacent. So this time, we have a 37 plus our x, and we know that these are going to be supplementary, so they're going to equal 180, because all these are going to be supplementary. So we're going to subtract 37 from both sides, and we end up with x equals 143 degrees. So subtracting 37 from both sides, we end up with 143 degrees. Okay? Alright, so that is supplementary. Two angles that add up to 180 degrees. The next one is a linear pair. A linear pair, so linear means line, so it's just that. It's two angles that we're going to put together to make a straight line. So two adjacent angles that form a straight line. They form a straight line. So if we go back up here to our supplementary, this one on the left, that would also be a linear pair. These are not only supplementary, but they're also adjacent, so that means they would be a linear pair. They are always supplementary. Supplementary. Linear pairs are always supplementary. Okay? Alright, so let's come over here. I'll go ahead and close that supplementary one again. It says two angles form a linear pair. If one angle measures 58, what is the measure of the other angle? So it's very similar to what we just got done doing for our supplementary ones up here. Sorry, let me push that up just a little bit for you. So they said two angles form a linear pair, so I know when I add them together, 58 plus x, because I don't know what that other one is, they have to equal 180 because they are supplementary. Equals 180 degrees. So I'm going to subtract again, subtracting my 58 from both sides this time, minus 58, and I get x equals 117 degrees. So subtracting 58 from both sides, I get 117 degrees for that other angle. What is the measure of the other angle? 117 degrees. Okay? Alright, great. We have one more left on this foldable, vertical angles. So let's take a look at that one. Vertical angles, those are two angles that are directly across from each other. They are directly across from each other when we have two lines intersecting. So they are congruent, or we could say equal. Those are always going to be congruent, or we could also say equal. Okay? All right, so what that looks like. So we have two lines intersecting here. Two lines intersecting. The ones across from each other. That could be across from each other right to left. That could be across from each other up and down. It doesn't make any difference as long as they are straight across from each other at that intersection. Okay? Those are going to be congruent to each other. So if we look at this first picture, if we know, let me fix that for you. If we know that the left side is 111, we know that the right side has to be congruent or equal to that, so it also has to be 111 degrees. Okay? Now if we look at the second one, we have the top is 99 degrees. Since x is across from that, it has to be congruent or equal to it. So if the top is 99, the bottom one also has to be 99 degrees. Okay, those are vertical. So when you're looking at your two lines intersecting, they are straight across from each other. Straight across, or opposite of each other. Opposite of each other would be another way to say that. Okay? Alright, so that's all for that foldable. The next thing that we're going to be looking at is the second handout that I gave you. It's a 2-page handout. The first page looks like this. It says special angle pairs. So you're going to be using that one. So with that, the second page are pieces for you to cut out. So you should have all these different pieces to cut out. So the way this one works, you're going to be putting one of these strips. So I should have 2 strips. I'm going to fold in the outside edges. So I'm going to fold in those outside edges so it makes little doors, like I'm opening some doors. I'm going to glue that on right there. Then on the bottom one, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to fold in those edges. And that's going to get glued in to this box space down here. So this bottom one is for vertical and congruence. The top one was for supplementary and complementary. So all of these pieces are going to get glued on to your foldable. I'm going to let you do those on your own. Okay, so the top one, again, complementary and supplementary. The bottom one is for vertical and congruent. So you're going to be gluing pieces on. Please read the directions on the page that you cut those out of. It will give you additional information there. So then down here, I'm going to have you complete this piece as well. You're going to circle the pairs that are complementary. So that means when you add up the pair, it should give you 90 degrees, complementary. Then on this side it says circle the pairs that are supplementary. So this time you're going to look for the ones that when you add them together give you 180 degrees. 180 degrees. Okay? Now down here in this blank piece, we're going to fill this in. All vertical angles are congruent. So all vertical angles are congruent. All vertical angles are congruent. Okay? So I am going to have you complete the rest of this on your own. You're going to go ahead and cut that out on the dotted line and glue that into your notebook. So this first foldable that we did, the angle pairs foldable, that goes on page 29 in your notebook. And this special angle pairs sheet, that goes on page 30 in your notebook. So that one gets glued in on page 30. That's actually all that I have for you today. Have a great day, and I'll see you in class. Bye.